Welcome back to the Lift Free and Diet Hard podcast. I'm your host, Andrew Coates. Join me along with industry leaders and friends on a quest to get more people through the gym door and eating and living healthier. Join me where evidence meets empathy while rejecting fitness industry fads and extremism. Let's begin. Zack Zillner, it's an honor to have you on. I say that a lot, but you've been doing incredible things in high performance sports coaching. You are the director of sports performance at the University of Miami for men's basketball. Congratulations. I know that was recent. You've got a lengthy history working in that space. You've coached gold medalists, NCAA champions. You work with pro athletes, and you're the co-host of the Coach 'em Up podcast. And I just recorded with Tim Riley. Tim's episode will air probably well before yours, but I've been binging this podcast. And I can't recommend enough coaches, especially if you guys want career development, athletic performance-based stuff. And a lot of my friends have been guests on. But welcome to my show.
Thanks for having me, man. I appreciate the high praise for our podcast. Especially, someone like you that's been in the game for a while, means a lot.
Well, I'm loving it. You guys have big sponsors, which is something I, kind of really plugged into now that I have some. And it's fun to see how, and I said this on Tim's episode, I'll say it again. I like paying attention to people who I think are doing a great job as hosts and their podcasts are growing because you can learn a lot as a podcast host from other people who do it well. And your guys is really fun. But now questions for you. And I saw you post this and I like this concept. What are movement cults and why are they bad? Let's open up that.
I think from our episodes with Kelly Matthews, we kind of got into movement. Actually, no, I think it was a Tim and I Q&A episode. We did movement cults. And basically, I think it went over these. You'll see a pro athlete get an injury, and then you'll see 100 posts the next day about if so-and-so would have just done my training methodology, ate my certain way, recovered the way I said, do these certain rehabs, none of this stuff would have happened. And they're kind of piggybacking off a horrible thing that happens to this athlete or individual and trying to sell programs or courses or whatever. And I don't want to think that these people are ignorant enough to really think that, there's certain protocol or recovery methodology or there's a certain way they do a lunge is the reason why this athlete got hurt. Like, I hope that they're smart enough to know that, there's thousands of factors that go into one injury. And for you to be arrogant enough that you pinpoint the exact reason why, I think is ridiculous. And the fact that you're using this to kind of posture yourself up, I think it's, poor form. It's no different than talking trash on another trainer or someone in general, just to, boost yourself up higher. I think if you're confident enough in your work that, your action should speak louder than anything.
It would almost feel like, and I've not seen this specifically, but it's the same phenomenon as someone criticizing a New York Yankees injury and saying that you could have done something better than Eric Cressy, who was the director of
For sure.
their strength and conditioning. Or it manifests in another funny way in the bodybuilding world where people like to claim, well, if only Ronnie Coleman had done my methodologies, Ronnie could have been even better. I mean, like, give me a
Better than
break. I'm
8
sorry.
championships. Like, come on.
Yeah, no, I'm not buying that for a second, right? Many roads. What are some of the things that contribute to the injury risk to kind of illuminate as to why, a coach making this claim is largely bullshit?
I think the biggest predictor of injury is previous injury. So unless you follow that athlete since they could walk realistically, because, we've fallen down and gotten injured in our middle school careers, high school careers, college, and so on. Like, if you know that you don't know their injury history, you don't know their pathology with everything, you haven't worked with them on a day-to-day basis, you don't know the events that led up to it. If there was, an issue with sleep, something in their personal life, recovery, all these other factors that we just can't put a finger on. And if people could actually put a finger on that kind of stuff, then people wouldn't get hurt. And so I think it's kind of wild for someone who just sees a clip and knows nothing about that athlete, their injury history, what they've done previous training wise, to think that they'd have some insight of what could have prevented said catastrophic injury.
And I certainly think that this cascades into the general population, right? There's so many factors. And like you said, previous injury being the big one. But if you think about high level sports, and you would be front row seat to this, the athletes are bigger, stronger, faster than ever. And any sport that has any amount of contact, there are higher forces acting on each other. We're seeing this now with the injury rates in baseball with pitchers because they're throwing harder than ever, right? This is getting a little technical, but emphasis on spin rates is a big thing, and that can put stress on elbows. We're seeing more Tommy John surgery than ever. And I'm just not convinced that anybody can, acutely say this particular set of exercises is going to guarantee that you cannot get hurt. When I'm sure that the major league pitchers, again, they're working with, Cressy Sports Performance coaches, a lot of them, they're not the only place, but you have some of the best people in the absolute world working with these players. So why are they getting injured so much? Like, it's almost proof that you cannot guarantee a training methodology can prevent injury.
Correct. And I think nowadays, we go back and forth of are they getting injured more, or is this something where there's more media and attention to the stuff and now more people care? But I think, to your point, these are the best, highest performing athletes the world's ever seen. I mean, if you look at the Olympics, there's world records set every Olympics, and the Olympics have been going on for thousands of years. So it's I'd say this day and age, we have some of the best athletes that have ever, graced the planet.
This episode is brought to you by Renaissance Periodization and the RP Hypertrophy app. RP is the industry leader in muscle building, coaching, and education. This app is like having a coach in your pocket. It gives you everything you need, including training programs, form videos, gives you all your sets, reps, and weights, so you just show up and follow the plan. It adjusts each week based off your progress. And the app was created by Dr. Mike Israetel, Nick Shaw, and the team at RP, who I've known for many years. And the entire team are incredible people who've always been supportive and generous with me, so I know their character and are easy to influence. My library contains several RP books, and I've used RP training principles in my workouts and coaching with my clients for many years, long before the explosion in popularity of their YouTube channel, which is worth checking out. RP is the first sponsor I felt remotely comfortable endorsing after over 7 years of podcasting. And if hiring a one-on-one coach isn't for you, using the RP Hypertrophy app is the next best thing to maximize your gains and take the guesswork out of your program. And there's a 30-day money-back guarantee, so you can try it risk-free. If you don't like it, they'll give you your money back. And I've also got a serious discount for you of up to $50 US. Go to rpstrength.com/coats and use the code COATSRP, or go to the link below in the show notes, and that's rpstrength.com/coats. Use the code COATSRP. So let's take the movement cult thing further, because I think there's another dimension to this, and there are people who brand around that their methodology is the best. And I'm going to throw one kind of notable example under the bus. If anybody's familiar with functional movement patterns, which, I mean, there's a lot of random and weird movement, but one of the things I notice is there's probably almost an absence of progressive overload on tissue there. So do you want to talk more about the issues with some of these movement cults, especially when they become really dogmatic in their training?
Yeah, I think the problem is and I was a victim of this young in my career, if you're only training a certain population, let's say a gen population, or even I don't know, pretty good college athletes, there's a huge difference between how those people move and operate, respond to training stimulus compared to the 1% of the 1%. And if you haven't seen that in person and worked with athletes like that, it's really hard to speak to this, because you don't realize how good they are at, their sport, creating force, creating tension, all these different things that you have no grasp of until you actually work with somebody at that level. And, not to say any of those methodologies are wrong. I think you could take some principles or underlying things that they believe in and, use them to cater to your needs. But do I think your whole program should be that one sector of how movement should be and everything? No. And I think there's difference between what you're trying to achieve with some of those movement cults versus, trying to windmill dunk the ball from the free throw line. There's totally different needs on the system compared to being able to flow and move and train for longevity versus training for performance.
How much of the stuff do you think is innate athleticism, or, the product of all the work they've done? And then you get, let's say an individual, I think the famous example, I like throwing shade at Tim Grover, who is Michael Jordan's trainer. And by all accounts, the stuff that Tim was having Michael do was probably standing on unstable surfaces or a bunch of random stuff. Jordan was probably great, not because of Tim, but almost in spite of his training. And that's the point I want to make is, how much is that just pure innate talent overrides, ineffective or suboptimal training methodologies.
Yeah, I think at the end of the day, we forget with sport, skill is above everything. So you've probably met plenty of guys in the gym who have unreal vertical jumps, can squat the house, all these things. But why aren't they playing on Sundays, or why aren't they playing in the NBA or MLB or whatever? It's because they enact that skill acquisition piece. And I think the biggest difference between, a really good athlete and elite athlete is how quickly they can pick up these skills. And until we realize that, our job's important, but until we dump all our eggs in the skill development basket, and everything we should do should give, them ability to have more capacity to practice these skills. Like outputs don't really matter at that point. So it's all about skill acquisition.
And then do you look at it as, well, okay, they develop a skill, and this could be not just high athletes, but any recreational person. And then you go in and you develop strength, speed, force production,
Yeah.
and those become multipliers for the skills.
I think so, to a point. I think sometimes in our space, we lean too far into it of like, you like to pat yourself on the back of, hey, I put 6 inches on his vertical, his squat went up 50 pounds, his bench went through the roof, he can do 20 pull-ups, and that all looks great. But how we're implementing that throughout the year, I think, is the difference maker between a very well-run program and just someone who makes people bigger, faster, stronger.
Makes a lot of sense. What happens when you get high-level athletes that may fall prey to, let's say, fitness trends or ideologies? And I remember something about an NFL player getting really into CrossFit and using CrossFit as his, I can't remember his name, this is years ago, as his methodology. And again, this is an N=1 example. It's an anecdote, but it seems like his performance on the field then regressed. Who knows? Maybe there's no relationship. But do you see examples of that where they get swept up in these cult-like ideas?
All the time. Because like before, when athletes 10, 15 years ago, they had no resources, nor were they going to go seek out how I should train or all these things. And if they did seek that out, they'd have maybe 3 books to choose from, and they're not going to read those two or 3 books. But now, you just pull up TikTok or Instagram or Twitter, and you have, these very convincing business-minded coaches that are out of, if you're not doing these 3 squat variations, your career is going to be hampered. Or if you're not, we see it a lot with diet culture. If you're not eating a certain way, if you're not vegan, or if you're not plant-based or carnivore, all these kind of things. And I think the best way that I've gone about it is I educate our athlete while they're doing something. So here's why we're squatting heavy today. Here's why we're running fast. Here's why today we're pulling back. And then when they have questions of, hey, I heard so-and-so is a vegan and he won the MVP last year, like, I'm thinking about doing that. It's like, okay, let's rewind. Let's figure out why we want to do this. Okay, your ultimate goal is performance. Okay, you right now eat 2 meals a day, and one of the meals is Sour Patch Kids and a Gatorade. Like, how about we work on cleaning up your diet first, and then we'll work on, hey, let's introduce some more fruits and vegetables. Maybe we'll play around with, hey, you like, plant protein better than, a meat source or whatever. And let's try to figure out kind of the reason why you want to do it and work backwards from there. I think, the greatest gift these athletes have is they're looking for that 1%. And if they think that if I eat a certain way or train a certain way, this could be the missing link. And I think it's up to us as practitioners not to immediately shame what they're doing and, oh, that's stupid. You should never do that. Of like, okay, let's figure out why this may or may not work for you. And then kind of give them the freedoms of, hey, if we're going to do these things, here's how it needs to be implemented. And here's how I can help you do those things. But there's been plenty of times where an athlete sees like the 3 ankle mobility things I need to do to get me better. Okay, sure. I can look at them and be like, okay, these are harmless, not a big deal. If you want to put those in and those are going to make you the best athlete possible, let's roll with it. Now, if there's something they want to do that I think is, going to cause them a higher risk of injury in the weight room on my watch, we're not going to do that. And here's why. But I think just kind of having that open collaboration effort with that athlete kind of helps set the tone for, what's expected in your room.
And you made me think of Michael Phelps and showing up with cupping marks on him at one of the Olympics. God, Jesus, forever ago now. But then all of a sudden there's all the rage.
Everyone wants to do cupping. Yeah.
Everyone wants to do cupping. It's like Michael Phelps was not great because of cupping. Michael Phelps was great because of his his legacy of preparation, his mindset, his work ethic. There's certain anthropometry things about his, spine flexibility, his height. He's got these oar-like
Built to
arms with
swim.
big hands. Yeah,
Yes.
it's almost like he was genetically engineered for it. The cupping is not the thing. It's all the other stuff. So this now opens up another line of dialogue. And again, let's relate this to the everyday person who probably wants to play sports, be active, wants to be in the gym, is trying to fit it all in busy life. Where's the line? Or how do you talk to the person who tries to do it all? And they're probably going to tip over the edge of the time and the recovery capacity to actually be able to do it all, where, as you alluded to, they're increasing their injury risk.
Yeah, I think you have to lay it all out on the table to kind of show them what it looks like. I use the example of, what does everybody do January 1st? It's like they went from never working out all year to, I'm going to do 2-a-days. And now hybrid's a big thing. So it's like, I'm going to run in the morning, lift in the afternoon. And then a week to 10 days later, they got shin splints or they're a stress fracture or they're hurt. Right. And so it's like, okay, I know you say you want this. What's the goal you want? You want to look better with your shirt off on the beach. Okay. So let's start out slowly. And if you want to run or lift, let's, space this out in a progressive manner. And then eventually 4 months down the road, we'll get to a point where you are running, 40-mile weeks and you're lifting 3 to 5 times a week and all this stuff. But in order to do that, we got to build up to this. Your nutrition needs to be on point. Your recovery needs to be on point. And I think of just laying the bigger framework of the bigger picture instead of, all right, let's start. You haven't done anything. Let's do a million things and get hurt. So I think it's all about taking like what they want and working backwards and trying to frame it in a way that works for both of you.
And taking that into consideration, what do you then turn around and say or do? And I think boundaries here with the athlete who says, okay, coach, but, Kobe Bryant, Michael Jordan, their work ethic, they never left the gym. They showed up early. They stayed late. Is there anything they're misunderstanding there? Or are Kobe and Michael is there a little bit of like, almost like post-rationalization narrative and survivorship bias in those stories because they're the greats? Where are the lessons and where are the boundaries with that stuff?
I think the biggest lesson to take is time on task to get good at something. Now, whether that really was at 3 a.m. or midnight or whatever, that doesn't really matter. So it's all about time on task. And I just went over this with one of our players today. So every year they'll come in this time of the year and they'll set their goals. So a player will come in and be like, I want to be an All-American. I'd be like, cool, I've coached plenty of All-Americans. These are the common habits I always saw with All-Americans: getting to bed on time, taking nutrition seriously, doing the mandatory stuff, weights, practice, but also outside of that, you need to get your treatment every day. And then you need to come in, another time during the day to get up some shot. Let's make a little column of all the stuff that you want to do towards your goal. And then we'll look. And, the first week, everyone's pretty spot on with all the little things. And then obviously the second week, oh, I missed shooting on Tuesday and Thursday. Oh, the next week I missed shooting on every day. And it's like, okay, let's look at your goals. You said you wanted to be an All-American. We're not coming in these times during the week. Let's change our goals. Let's be an all-conference player. That's the kind of effort you're putting in. Let's just be an all-conference player. Or we can change our actions and keep pursuing the goal we want to pursue. So I think it's all about getting their mind wrapped around of it's a full-time job. Just, it's inputs and outputs. Like you can't just be putting your foot on the gas pedal all the time and not, building the infrastructure to be able to attain those, high outputs that you want to do. So it's kind of mapping out their day and giving them, the best course of action to build up to a point where they're in the gym 3 or 4 times a day, just like these guys before.
And is there anything on the other side of it? Because you're obviously talking about the guys who are not meeting the standard that you set, which is the plan, which that they could recover from. What about the guys who you can't get them out of the gym, right?
Yeah. I think I like working with those just because you usually have a very driven person. And I think we have to be smarter about, okay, let me see your 2 individual sessions you have. Okay, they both look the same. You go, hard as shit both times for an hour. And, that's great. It's got to where you need to go. But hey, let's take one of those sessions and turn it into more of a skill session. So just because you're not puking in the trash can doesn't mean we're not getting anything out of it. So let's have a session where we fine tune things in the morning. And then at night, you can go as hard as you want for that hour. And then let's just stack that and let me know how you feel after a week. We can always go back to doing what you want to do. But usually after a week of that, they're like, wow, turns out those skill sessions, I'm getting better at my shooting. I'm recovered enough where I can actually go even harder in that second session instead of just wasting it. Because you know what happens is you go really hard in the morning, you're tired, and then your second session is just sluggish. You don't get any skill out of it, and you're operating at a lower, threshold than you would have if you were fresh. So it's kind of taking the reins back to kind of be able to do more, your next session, but have it planned out of like, this is going to be a skill session and this is going to be more of a work capacity, get after it type situation.
This episode is brought to you by Just Bite Me Meals. I work long days and I won't compromise my client experience or sacrifice my workout, sleep, or nutrition. So I needed a quality and reliable meal prep service so I could save time on cooking and shopping and have more time for the stuff that matters. Net out the cost of groceries and the service isn't as much as you might think, and regular impulsive food delivery apps, eating out, that costs way more anyway. I get more meal variety and less dishes to clean, and I've been referring clients to Just Bite Me Meals for a long time, and I recently started ordering myself. Food is great. The beef brisket tacos are my favorite so far, and there's a lot of menu choice. Your calories and macros are listed. The portions are great. You can order custom meals. They deliver to your door, or you can pick up from the storefront. And I'm sorry to listeners outside of Alberta, but Just Bite Me Meals is currently just in Edmonton, Calgary, Grand Prairie, and Fort McMurray. Ordering from Just Bite Me Meals made my life easier instantly. And you can get 10% off on all your orders using my code, Andrew Coates Fitness, all caps, on their website. That's Andrew Coates Fitness, all capitals, or go to the link and the code in the show notes. Do you think part of this with athletes, everyday people, is it's sometimes the brute force stuff? It's all they know, and therefore they default to the things they know, or they believe, hey, I'm supposed to do this. I'm supposed to suffer and hurt. Is that they think that's part of the process?
And I think they like that. Like when you leave drenched in sweat, gonna die, you felt like I did all I could do to get better that day. But maybe the challenge is, hey, I know you like working hard. Maybe the challenge is let's pull back for a little bit, working on a different skill set. And it'll help set you up in the future so these other things are, better executed at a high level. It's like us in the gym. If putting on muscle mass is your main goal, probably wouldn't make sense to do all your cardio before your lift, right? But if we just flipped it around where you lifted first and then do your cardio after, you're probably going to get better results if, lifting and getting stronger is your goal. So it's kind of this with reworking it, kind of empowering them with the knowledge of, have you ever thought about it this way? Because usually the people in their ears are somebody who's, really hard-nosed coach or an uncle or a cousin who thinks they got it figured out. And, I think that's the importance of building those relationships with those athletes so they can, listen to you and understand like, your interest is my best interest. If you're a better player, we're going to win more games and that's going to make me happy. And it's also going to get you to where you want to go. So I think it's building that relationship and create an environment where they're not afraid to ask these questions and give inputs both ways.
You earlier mentioned recovery things like getting enough sleep and nutrition. Is there anything else that you find is fairly high leverage when it comes to recovery? And that can be, again, for the athletes you're working with or the everyday person. And Tim and I, on our episode, we talked about how I certainly don't see, and he agreed, high-level athletes and the everyday person is this dichotomy. It's just there are different points on a spectrum of athletic output and activity.
I think the biggest thing is an intelligently designed program is your best recovery. So, if you don't have an intelligently designed program you're running, I don't care how much sleep, protein powder, creatine, sauna, cold plunge, massages, whatever you get, like you're going to be so far in the hole anyways that none of those things are going to matter. And, let's say you hired a great coach and they have everything periodized great for you, all the training's dialed in, then I think like your biggest moving blocks, and no one wants to hear it, it's sleep and it's nutrition. And I think the sooner these athletes, especially the younger ones, figure out nutrition, your whole life gets a lot easier. And I think that's for the average person too. Like all your strength issues, your recoverability, your body comp stuff, it comes back to nutrition. And we've all done this in our younger ages. When you're 20, you can eat cheeseburgers all day, hit the gym twice a day, and you still get results. And as you creep up into your 30s, all of a sudden oh shit, this nutrition stuff matters. And I think the sooner you can get on board with that, the easier your life's going to be.
To your point, I remember I've been lifting since I was in my teens. I had a weight bench in my basement, but I finally got really consistent and serious about 24. And I went from 170 pounds to 210 pounds in 7 months. That was natural. A lot of some creatine, a lot of protein powder, a lot of food. But I was working out 4 to 5 times a week, mostly a bro bodybuilder split. And I was drinking both nights of the weekend. And I got
fine.
no problem whatsoever. Cannot do shit like that now, right? To your point. And I know there's some good genes on that side of stuff, but not pro bodybuilder genes either. I would be working out next to me is my old friend Frank McGrath, who's a IFBB pro. Yeah, right. This is like Newfoundland. And Frank looked like a pro bodybuilder in like our early university days. Like this guy's like, you're going to be a pro. It's not even a question. So that's a different level of it. But side note, okay, what about, you've obviously worked with a lot of young athletes, and there can be at times wild side of this. How detrimental is that stuff for them? And then let's translate that into the adult who's 30s, 40s, 50s, who is already struggling to stay lean, the body composition you mentioned, stay healthy, manage injuries. Where's the balance there? How detrimental is this stuff to a high level athlete, and how detrimental is it to the everyday person?
Yeah, I mean, I like to educate them, back we talked about before, like, I know you're in college. I know you're in 18 to 22. Like, this is probably going to be the most fun time of your life. And I'm not telling you, hey, don't drink, don't have fun, blah, blah, blah. Because like, what are they going to do? They're going to do the complete opposite. So we kind of arm them with the education of, if you're going to drink, here's what I would drink. Here's the quantities I would drink. Here's the things I would eat or drink with it. Keep in mind what days you're doing this on. And then I always tell them, like, when it starts interfering with why you're here and you're here to be the best basketball player possible, you need to cut it out. So, there's times of the year where it's like, hey, it's Friday in June. Everyone's back on campus. You want to have a couple of beers and, talk to your friends and some ladies. Cool. But like, you need to cut that stuff out by the time Monday rolls around, because if you have every month, like we have 8 weeks in the summer, every Monday, you're still dragging ass from the weekend of not eating, being dehydrated, sleeping all to sleep. Like, that's 8 sessions. That's almost a week you missed out just because you were hungover and couldn't make your priorities your priorities. And then in season, I always challenge everybody to like, don't drink. Like, let's see if we can make a team commitment to not do this for the goal you want. Like a lot of these players, like, you have 4 years to potentially make $100 million. That's a lot of money. That's generational wealth. So if you can lock in for 4 years, you're almost guaranteed in this situation with these coaches you have around you, the support staff, all these things where you can be a millionaire playing the thing you've played since you were 5 years old. So why not sell out and do it? And so I think that's our biggest message of like, if you're going to do it, here's, the day and what I would do if I was doing it. And then keep in mind of the effects that will have downstream. So we did an experiment with one of our players and the Oura rings or Whoop bands or whatever. So we got her an Oura ring, and I'm like, wear this, we'll track your sleep and everything. And then after the summer, I looked at it, I was like, what'd you notice about drinking? And, kids are like, oh, I don't drink or whatever. I'm like, well, let's look at the stuff. She's like, well, I drank on this day and that day. And I'm like, look, so you drank Friday and you weren't back to baseline till Wednesday. Like, so you missed Saturday, Sunday, Monday, Tuesday being suboptimal. So it's 4 days out of the week. So it's more than 50% of your week. You're trying to get back out of the hole you dug yourself Friday night. And is that going to help you, be the best athlete you want to be? And you're like, oh shit, probably not. You know what I mean?
And let's take that and go, all right, you've got a late teen, early 20 something with all the recovery in the world. What I alluded to, what my experience is like, and that's what they're experiencing. What's that doing to the person in the late 30s, mid 40s, who has nowhere near the recovery capacity, right? We just recover slower as we get older there. So there's a lot of stuff that's a bit slower. Metabolism isn't, but a lot of other things are. And that person is still going out. And quite frankly, as you get older, your alcohol tolerance tends to go up. And you tend to feel worse the next day. That was certainly been my experience. I drink
better at
minimally
drinking
now. Get better at drinking, right? Acquired skill, dangerous shit. So now take that into the life of that person.
Yeah, I think you just have to go back and look at, and this was really the eye-opening moment for me when I was, early 20s. I would always give my older friends shit because I could drink all night. And then the next day I could go on a 20-mile bike ride and run 10 miles and lift, and I was fine. And then about the time I got to 30, it was a different ball game. And I kind of had the realization of, I don't think drinking's bad, but I think, if you're doing it every weekend, you need to keep track of like, okay, what's it not letting me do the subsequent days after that? So like, I like working out and training and everything. And I would notice like, if I drank the next day, if I trained, it was sloppy, I wasn't having a good time. And the next day I was still, a little sluggish. And it's like, well, it's robbing me of the things that I actually love doing. You know what I mean? And so if it's like, is it worth my night of, the drinking beers with my buddies to screw up the things I actually love doing throughout the week? And, you kind of have to make, the same example I did with the player of, you want to be an All-American. It's like, do you want to be good at your career? Do you want to, be able to train like you want to train? You have good relationships with people, like excel in life. And there's very few people that their key to success was boozing 4 nights a week and staying out till 2 a.m. Like, I don't think that's a commonality with a lot of highly successful people.
I think there's a small sliver that gets stuck in this place. I know some of them who are the sales types who end up traveling
For sure.
and the social alcohol is a part of their job.
Part of the job,
right?
yeah.
They're taking out clients and, whether it's going to sports games or restaurants or whatever. But in talking to all of them, they feel that and they feel very trapped.
Mm-hmm.
Have you ever dealt with that, like managing that particular conundrum?
Yeah, I think it's kind of one of those things. And one of my friends and I would always take off February from drinking when we were younger. So it's like, it's the shortest month. So we're going to go a month of February not drinking. And basically, you go out and it's the one vice that people have that if you tell them you're not doing it, they take offense to it. Like, oh my God, why? Well, what's the matter with you? And I think if you can get over that hump of like, yeah, I'm only having 2 drinks tonight, or actually I'm not drinking tonight, and just kind of get over that awkward thing. I'd rather have one awkward conversation and have my next week be rainbows and butterflies than you kind of give into that pressure. And then all of a sudden you wake up the next day and like, why did I listen to Dave, last night on a Tuesday? Like, there's no reason I needed to have that many drinks. And I think you just have to kind of get over yourself with that and see the bigger plan of everything. And, if it is part of your job where, your client likes to have a beer with you at dinner, like I think 1 or 2 drinks is fine. And then just make up an excuse. I got something really early in the morning. I got this thing going on. Like, who cares? And if someone's really hounding you, you might need to question, why you're hanging out with that person all the time.
I've got a good friend, and there was a juncture where we stopped hanging out socially in the evenings. Still good friends. Went to the gym with him recently. And I think withdrawing from a certain environment with him, I noticed I'd cut down drinking dramatically. And then I noticed as career stuff just got busier and busier and busier, and I'm working, lots on weekends. And I noticed the difference between my energy and focus and what I could get done. And I'm like, and then maybe I'm tempted to have a drink. I'm like, no, because like I will feel this tomorrow. And I have a good relationship with it if I'm in a social situation with some close friends, sure. But anything that gets aggressive, but what then I noticed is that friend is now, I'm one less person who is enabling his stuff. And he saw a very dramatic turnaround in what was going on in his life, got back to the gym much more seriously, and was probably in the best shape of his life too. So sometimes it takes you being the catalyst for change. And sometimes forget that our role in, enabling other people.
Yes. Yes. And I think especially a lot of us, like, we're in leadership positions. I feel like most trainers or strength coaches or whatnot, like, you're somewhat, you kind of have that mechanism about you. You like to, lead and be in charge and to your point, like, be the catalyst for change, challenge your group. Like, hey guys, let's try to do the February thing where we don't drink. And then we kind of talk about like, wow, I was so productive. Like, I got all my weekends back, felt good. I'm looking better than I did. I don't have a moon face anymore. Like, this is actually pretty fun. But I think you just save it for things that are, you deem to be fun? Like as far as like you haven't seen your friends in a while or something you're celebrating, but just like a Tuesday night where you're hammering drinks, I don't think that really leads to much success either way.
I want to tap into your real skill set here too. I've been really interested in, because as I get older and as I train almost overwhelmingly all general population, some older adults, is maintaining or developing speed, power, explosiveness. And why this stuff's really important as we get older. And Tim and I talked a little bit about this, but I would love your insights into how you approach training these qualities. And obviously there's what you do with your high level athletes, but what would you do with someone who's a bit more general population to introduce them to this stuff, to convince them this stuff is important?
Yeah, I think everyone, for the most part, realizes, when you get older, you lose strength. And, it's not quite as a rapid rate as some of these other qualities. So like strength, I think the science is like, if you hit strength basically once every like 4 to 6 weeks, you'll keep everything within 80%. And, that's not optimal, but like my point is you can keep strength a lot longer than some of these other skills. And I think speed is something you lose in like a couple days or a week. Power is the same kind of situation. And so imagine if you haven't, the new trend now is, have you seen your boyfriend or girlfriend sprint and they video each other? So get on TikTok, waste some time. And there's this new trend where like, when's the last time you sprinted? And most people are like high school, middle school, whatever. And it's people, around our age. And it's like, why did we all of a sudden think that the second we were done competing in sports that like sprinting, your legs were just going to blow off and your hamstrings are going to detach from your legs? I think it's, to be a well-rounded human, you need to have strength development, cardio development, and then power and speed. And I think, a great way to start picking this up, because Tim and I were talking, we hope the next trend in fitness is training like an athlete. And I think the biggest low hanging fruit is like low level plyos, like start getting back into it by, jumping rope, any of these low level depth drops, throw a med ball, and you'd be amazed when you get out of this sagittal lifting environment that we're all in and all brought up in, that you start rotating and moving and being fluid, how much better your body feels. And it's the rhythmic coordination factor, I think, that you're missing with traditional barbell and dumbbell training that, kind of keeps you youthful.
You said sagittal. So anybody who's not used that language, that is really everything that just moves forward, back. It's all like in front of us. And if you ever hear people talk about the frontal plane, that term is very misleading, because the frontal plane, you're actually talking about lateral movement.
Yeah.
But if you actually think about almost everything we do in the gym, lunging, squatting, bench pressing, rowing, everything, it is all forward, back, right? Or up and down, but still very much forward, back. So there's not a lot of classical bodybuilding style stuff that has side to side or rotational components to it. So just even bringing some of that stuff in, are there any basic exercises that you think are really compatible and easy to learn for just, someone who's not, it's a general gym goer, but not super used to it, that you say, hey, go do this stuff. It's going to change your life?
Yeah, I think like skipping, Stu McGill, he's like one of the best sprint coaches in the world. He was just on Huberman.
Stu McMillan.
McMillan, yeah. Stu McGill's the bad guy.
Yeah.
Stu McMillan.
Yeah.
He talks about skipping and this is rhythm coordination. I think anything like we talked about before, being able to rotate. I know like, and a lot of us can attest to this, like when we were younger, like you get your bench, squat, deadlift up and you're strong as a house. And this was a realization to me. They were filming one of our sessions, like a behind the scenes, the team's training, and I was demoing like a skip or a bound or something. And I watched myself, I'm like, dude, this guy looks so stiff and not rhythmic and anything like that. And I'm like, well, you lost those skills because you were just training to be, big and like a bodybuilder essentially. And although, you think you look pretty cool, you're not very useful as far as being able to perform athletically. So I think, when I stopped doing that as much and incorporating in some like med ball toss, rhythm skips, jumping, hopping, sprinting, change of direction stuff, you start noticing all these little tweaks you have from traditional staying in the same plane, lifting all the time kind of go away. And it makes training more fun. Like I think once you get to a certain point where you're like, you've lifted, as heavy as you want to lift and you have no goal to get stronger than that. It's like, why don't you pursue a different endeavor of speed and power? And you look at all these top athletes, and I think a lot of people would strive to have those physiques unless you're, trying to be a professional bodybuilder or a power lifter. I don't think there's any reason why you wouldn't add in those athletic components.
Do you have any boundaries around or cautions around people who start introducing this stuff about just the volume and the frequency because it's something they
Start
haven't done?
slow. Yeah, like start less than you think. What I would do if I was ground zero, didn't know anything, I would look up on YouTube like dynamic warm up, and I would do that every single day. So, your skips, your hops, your karaoke's, your high knees, your butt, like all these basic stuff. And I would get used to doing that and then slowly add, like for a sprint day, it's like, okay, I need to start out slow. So maybe I'm going to do five, 50s or 40s. And I'm going to go at 70% working on my form and everything. That's going to be done for that session. And the next day, I'm going to take a day off, just do that dynamic warm up. The next day, I'm going to do the same thing, but maybe 75 or 80. So it's the slower build. And I know it's exciting. You just watch a YouTube video of a athletic dude or chick sprinting really hard or jumping really high. You're like, I'm going to go do that. And then you pop your hammy or your Achilles or something like that. So I think the biggest thing is start out slow and build up the volume under those low intensities. And then you can start, in a couple months of, I'm going to see how fast I am in a 10 or a 20 and then go from there.
And think if anybody's seen this, Ashton Hall, he's this guy who's gotten pretty viral for, I don't know, his morning routine, jacked dude. And then he did some sort of like workout with DJ Khaled. Okay.
Yeah.
And you guys want to think you're like Ashton Hall. Trust me, over what we're all DJ Khaled in that situation, right? So
yeah,
if you haven't seen this, go watch the video. It's really entertaining. Okay. Are there any things that you hope to develop in your young athletes outside of their sports performance?
Absolutely. I think mindset with life, and then all the little things do matter. And, I think the biggest thing of these athletes, especially at this level, is everyone's, for lack of a better term, kind of kissed their ass since they were 10 years old all the way till now. They're the best player in their team, state, country, whatever. And they haven't really been treated like a regular person. As far as like, if you're a really good athlete, if you're late, people might excuse it, or you don't do this, they're fine. And I want to kind of arm them with these skills and habits. So when they do, their playing career does end, they can use those same skills that we've worked on, work ethic, being accountable on time, leadership, and they can take that to their next endeavor. And I think if you don't arm them with these people skills, like you'll have great athletes, but we're in the business, I think, of, making better humans. So, why not take those lessons you've learned from sport and apply them to the business world?
I think we get lots of these stories, these anecdotes out of pro sports. And for every Michael Jordan who, go watch The Last Dance and you kind of know what he was like. He's sort of, again, survivorship bias and quite an outlier. For the most part, the people who seem to have there's luck and injury, sure. But the people who seem to have these really long careers tend to, I always think it's Zdeno Chara, if anybody's familiar with the NHL hockey player. I was really happy him and Tom Brady, until he retired a few years ago, I could always claim that there was somebody playing major North American pro sports who was actually older than me. But now this is a sobering moment in your life when there is nobody in major North American pro sport who is, you're older than every single active athlete. That is a mind fuck right there. But Zdeno played, I think, got it till about 45. And then he started running marathons. Dude was running the Boston Marathon. He's 6'9", 260 pounds, at least in his playing days. But again, incredible work ethic. Definitely the impression that he was, probably clean living, good nutrition. And then I always think on the other side of it, it's a guy like Danny Heatley. Yeah, scored 50 goals in his like mid-20s. But the guy was notorious. This is a fact. He pretty much, choose my words semi-carefully, got his friend Dan Schneider killed in a car accident when they were like early 20-somethings and again, his partying lifestyle. And then he was washed up out of the league at 30 years of age. So again, these are anecdotes and outliers, but I think they're representative of what we kind of see at the ends of the scale.
No doubt.
All right. Everybody can find you on Instagram, Zack_Zillner. What else do you want to direct people to? And you were mentioning, a lot of these dynamic warm-ups and movement stuff. Your social media is full of video of athletic stuff. So there's a gold mine there for anybody who wants to dive in. But what else do you want people to check out?
Yeah, check out my Instagram. I'm trying to get better about, posting all the stuff that I'm learning and kind of showing my methodology behind, why I do what I do with my athletes. I think it's an awesome free resource. If you want any programming, if you go to speakeasystrength.com, I sell basketball programs, regular guys who are our age programs, women's programs, all that kind of stuff there. But yeah, Instagram's usually my main social media.
And of course, the Coach 'em Up podcast, which
Coach 'em Up podcast. You got to hit that up.
Yeah. And I guess you're on a lot of the episodes, most of them. Tim is always there by default. And sometimes your travel and your day job keeps you away from them, but still you're on more than you're not. And, well, anyway, so Tim already announced it on air, but I am traveling down in August to come on as a guest, which I'm honored to do. And the timing may not leave you there. So if I don't get to meet you in person, it's been...
I'm hoping I get to sneak down. It'll be fun.
Hopefully so. And then it'll get you guys over. There's an RP strength event the next day from my planned recording. I'm going down for a couple of days, and I'll be hanging out with Nick Shaw, Mike Isotel, and the whole RP crew. So hopefully you get to meet them as well, because I'm pretty sure Tim has got to come along. So,
oh yeah. Torture Tim again.
Yeah. Everybody dive into Zach's work, please. And, I'll show out an episode. You were on my friend Luca Hosevar's Vigor Life podcast a while back. And that was actually one of the things I listened to for a bit of research. And it was probably one of the earlier times where, you got more on my radar at that point. And I'm like, all right, this is great. I got to dive into what you and then, of course, Tim are doing. And it's been great to have you guys on. Definitely that emphasis, as you said, on, the athlete for Lucas' slogan, athlete for life. So I do think we're seeing more of it, whether it's Alyssa Olenek, and you mentioned hybrid training, that stuff. It seems like it's getting more out in the ethos. So I'm kind of hoping people are willing to embrace that. And especially as we get older, realize that we can still do it and get better at it. So
absolutely.
Thanks for coming on. I appreciate it.
Thanks for having me. Appreciate you.